Good afternoon. We're here
Good afternoon.
we're here at Ruth's house, and we're here to capture some memories of Jewish life in Springfield, going back perhaps to the 1930s, perhaps the 1940s. So it's March 21st, 2008. I'd like to start with Millie. Millie, could you tell us your full name? And
I was Mildred Goldstein, and I'm Mildred Jodab now.
And what were your parents' names?
Goldstein,
Your father's name?
Henry Goldstein, and he was a cattle dealer and a butcher. We had a kosher meat market in Springfield, and it was North Street then. It wasn't a White Street, as I remember it. And my grandparents lived right around there too. And what else do you want?
Can you tell me your grandparents' names?
Anna and Jacob Goldstein.
And your father was in the...
My father was a cattle dealer and the meat market, and we had a meat market on North Street. It was at that time.
From when to when would you say the meat market was? From?
Oh, I would say until about in the 30s.
Was it a kosher meat market?
Kosher meat market. Yes. It was between Essex Street and 10th Street. And that was a Jewish neighborhood. The bakery was there.
Right.
The meat markets were there. Fish market was there.
Yeah.
Whatever you wanted
What was the name
was
of the
there.
business?
What was the name of the business? The butcher shop was called?
Goldstein's.
Goldstein's.
Ken?
Okay, we'll move on to Mickey. Give us your full name and where you're from.
I was the only, children, were four of us in the family. I was the only Jewish kid with an Irish name, Mickey. And because my brother was named Lazar, my two sisters were named Fagi and Hindi. They always called them by their Yiddish names. But for some reason they gave me that Irish name, Mickey.
What's your last name?
Temkin, Temkin.
And what were your parents' names?
Well, my father was named Jacob Temkin, and my mother, her name was Leah Pava. Her maiden name was Pava. Yeah, and my mother was born on Ferry Street, one of the few that was born in this country in 1891. So that goes way back.
Do you know what brought her family to
Well,
Springfield?
they immigrated from Russia to New York, and then my grandmother heard that there was more opportunity in Boston to get a job for her husband, so they took a train from New York to Boston. But on the way to Boston, the train stopped in Springfield, and for some reason, some man got up on the platform. He convinced them that there's more opportunity in Springfield.
Wow.
So they decided to come to Springfield, and they were there. 1888 is when they came.
1888.
1888.
And what did your grandparents do for a living at that point?
Well, my grandfather was a fixer of umbrellas. In those days, umbrellas were used
Was
quite.
Was that Bloom?
No, that's another family.
Okay, fixer of umbrellas.
He used to, and he had a door-to-door route. He had customers that he would go around every couple months to check on their needs to getting their umbrella fixed, because they had these big black umbrellas that were always getting out of commission. So he made a living doing that. He was a persistent, salesman. I follow in his footsteps because I've been a door-to-door salesman all my life.
What have you sold?
Fuller brushes. Did you ever hear of Fuller?
Sure,
You heard
sure.
that?
What did your father do for a living?
My father was he used to sell, he was in the wholesale candy business, wholesale candy. He would sell to drugstores and to variety stores. He had a route of stores that he'd sell. The Milky Way, Hershey bars, Fifth Avenue, O. Henry, all the popular brands. And he did it until he was about 60 years old. And then he went to work for Westinghouse because it was war years, and you couldn't get the candy for some reason, so he decided to go to Westinghouse. He worked there. He was an inspector in Westinghouse.
What was the name of the umbrella business? Do you remember?
Well, it was Pava Umbrella Company, I guess. Yeah, because that was his last name.
And where did the family live? Do you
He lived in the north end of Springfield, Ferry Street and Sharon Street, in that area. Most of the Jewish people lived in those two streets. A few lived higher up, called Congress Street, which is a little more affluent. Right.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
We'll come back.
Okay.
Eileen, can you tell us your family name, your name, and then your family name?
Well, way back it was Applebaum. Then it got to be Grinspoon. And I'm a Grinspoon now.
Your parents' names?
Your
My
parents' names?
My parents' names were, oh God, that's way back.
Yeah.
Your father's first name. You know,
My father's birthday.
First name.
First name, Israel.
And your mother?
Rose.
And do you know your
They're
mother's?
very Jewish.
Uh,
They were very Jewish when they were alive. Yeah.
And what was your mother's maiden name? Do you know?
Rose.
Her maiden name, her family name.
Klein, Klein.
Where did your parents come from?
Chicago.
What brought them to Springfield, and when did they come here?
They didn't come to Springfield. They remained in Chicago. They had relatives in Chicago, and they stayed in that area to be with people that they knew.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father has done many things over the years, and the last that I can recall that he was doing was selling vegetables and fruit to small areas, and he remained there because they didn't ever want him to go away, and he never came home until 12 o'clock at night.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Very hard-working man.
Very hard.
What did your father had a business on Ferry Street?
Yes.
No,
I'm sorry. But he did go to gather his fruits and vegetables there, then went over to an area where he did all the work and sold to all the people around
He's
him.
on the outside of Springfield, little towns on the outside.
Oh, he would carry it with him and sell to other people.
He
Yeah.
had a truck.
He had a truck.
Oh, he was peddling.
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 They used to
Yeah,
peddle
that's the
with a
word he
horse
is.
and
He was a
wagon.
peddler.
And what was the name
And
of it?
everybody loved him.
What was the name of his business? Do you know what he called himself?
Would he have a name?
I don't know what he called his business other than my business.
What street did you live on in the North End?
In the North End, Bancroft Street.
And Massasoit Street.
Well, that was when I was
very
very
small.
small, yeah.
Right.
And then Bancroft Street.
What we didn't ask the people is what shul did your family go to?
The Rosh Shul.
Rosh Shul.
Yeah.
Let's go back and get Mickey. Mickey, what shul did your family go to?
Beth Israel on Chestnut Street.
On Chestnut Street.
Mine did too. The
Beth
Beth
is-
Israel.
And do you remember the rabbi there?
Rabbi Silver.
I remember that.
Yes.
Rabbi Silver.
And at the Rosh Shul, who was the rabbi?
I don't know.
Haitovsky. Cantor
Haitovsky.
Haitovsky. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Let's go move on to Stanley.
Stanley, can you give us your full name?
Stanley K. Fisher. What else can I tell
Your
you?
parents' names.
My parents were David L. Fisher, and my mother was Sarah Binsky. Her maiden name was Binsky. And she was born in New York City. My father was born in Lithuania. And his father came to this country when my father was just a baby, just a few years old. And he worked here, my grandfather worked here for about 5 years. He started off in Boston, but he had relatives here in Springfield, so he finally landed up in Springfield. And then he sent for his family, which included my father, a brother, his brother, and 2 sisters, and a mother. And they all came at that point. And that was in the later 80s, 1885 up to 89, around in that time.
And what did they do for work, your grandfather?
My grandfather in the old country was a fisherman. And that's where he got the name Fisher, because when he came to this country, they asked him his name. But he was known as Jacob the Fisher. But the real family name is Mattis, M-A-T-T-I-S. But it never got used here in this country.
And what did he do then, your grandfather in Springfield?
My grandfather started off like all the rest of the Jewish people, most of them, peddling. And he started to peddle in Boston.
My
And
father was the first
He
peddler.
worked his way from
Springfield.
Boston to Springfield because he had relatives here. So he settled in Springfield.
What kinds of things was he peddling?
Oh, the peddlers at that time, anything that the woman in the house could use. And they went from town to town. And some of them wound up with stores, finally. But they started off as peddlers.
Did you think your grandfather had a pack on his back, or did he have a horse and a pack?
Back on his back.
Uh-huh.
That's
And-
how
and
they
what-
did it.
Your father.
Yeah. What became of your grandfather? Did he set up a store? Did he remain a peddler?
No, he, as I remember, he had a house on Essex Street in Springfield. That's still part of the North End.
North End, yeah.
And I can't remember that he had any job at that time. I guess he kept himself busy.
What about your father? What did he do for a living?
My father had a small window cleaning business, the Bay State Window Cleaning Company,
That's what it was called.
And where was it out of?
out of Westfield,
Out of Westfield.
in Westfield, yeah.
Uh-huh. And what work did you end up doing?
Hmm?
What did you end up doing for a living?
Oh, I was a CPA.
We didn't ask these people.
Yeah, we'll come
We'll
back.
come back.
I started off making the bills for my father.
And that's how you started. And what shul did you go to?
Israel.
That's Israel.
That's Israel.
That's Israel.
Uh-huh. And can you tell us the streets you lived on?
That's
Lived
Essex?
First lived on Allendale Street, and when I was a baby, I lived at 15 Allendale Street in the North End. Then we went to Dwight Street. It was called North Street, I think, at that time.
North Street.
1381 North, I remember. And had a brother and 2 sisters. And then my father bought a house on Allendale Street, 39 Allendale. So I spent my youth there.
Okay, thank you. We're going to come back again. Eva, can you tell us something about how you got to Springfield? Give us your full name first, sorry.
My name is Eva Rosenberg Blackman. My mother and father were born in Russia. I was born in Hartford. And there was no shoe factories there, but my grandmother and grandfather was there, so my mother wouldn't budge. So when they died, when I was 5, we moved to New York. But I used to travel back and forth, and we had relatives in Springfield. They used to go across with a little boat to the relatives. In fact, my relatives are the first relatives in West Springfield to be buried there.
What are their names, do you know?
Not really.
Okay, we can find out.
I really can't remember their Silmans.
Okay.
That was their names. The Silman family, they had a tailor shop
In Springfield.
Then my cousin Marshall later, he had a business in West Springfield. And at 36, my husband had a heart attack, so he thought that we should move to Springfield, where it's very peaceful and quiet. That's what brought us to Springfield.
What year was that about?
50 years ago.
So about 1950,
In the 50s, yeah.
in the 50s.
When I came here, I thought it was a real dead town. From Brooklyn, in Queens, and I lived in Queens. I lived in all the boroughs. I even lived in Staten Island for a while.
And what did you end up doing, you and your husband, here in Springfield?
Well, my cousin opened a New England Electronics where you rebuilt picture tube. You know how you bring a bottle back of milk, you get a new bottle every time you brought. So they did that with picture tubes. If the television tube died, they would rebuild it for $35 instead of buying a new tube. But then my husband had a massive heart attack, and the business didn't work out because now you just put the plug in and it works.
Right.
That's what brought us here.
Where did you live in Springfield, and how did you decide where to live in Springfield in the 50s?
I lived on we bought a house on Allen Street, on Newhouse Street, and we lived there 5 years when he died. But my kids were here, and we did a lot better here than we would have done in New York. I couldn't have survived as a widow in New York, as here it was easier to get by. And so we're here so many years.
Right. Were you involved with the synagogue?
The Kadima. My husband was quite religious, not me, but he was. So we joined the Kadima with Rabbi Weisvogel.
Sure. Okay. We're going to move on. We'll come. Something else you wanted to say? Yeah.
No, not really.
Okay. We'll come back. Yeah.
I'll tell you, when you come back the second time around, you can talk to what I find the difference between then and now.
Okay. Is it Ruth? Ruth? Ruth, can you tell us your full name and your parents' name?
Lived down on Morgan Street, North End.
Your parents' names.
No, they're gone.
Their names.
Bessie Sawson and Samuel Sawson.
Sawson.
It's S-O-S-I-N.
S-O-S-A-N.
Sosin.
And your last name now?
Okay.
Sawson. Same name.
My name,
Same.
same, Ruth Sawson.
And where did you live?
Morgan Street,
And that was in the North End?
Morgan.
Uh-huh. And what did your family do for a living?
My father worked for the Country Club's soda company
It's Bloom.
and then went to school. My sisters graduated. 2 of them worked for the Country Club. Another sister worked for the American Saw.
American Saw.
Yeah.
Where did your parents come from?
My mother came from Russia. My father came from Russia. My mother came from Lithuania.
Do you know what brought them to...
They met here. They lived in Holyoke, and then they came back to Springfield.
So now I'd like to go back to, if we could, talking a bit about the North End. If you can remember as a child or later shopping there, where you would shop, who the merchants were, and maybe you have some stories, little things you can remember about the North End and what became of the North End. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Millie.
The north end, well, we had North Street, and then it changed to Dwight Street. And North Street, Dwight Street had all the markets and all the Jewish kosher markets were there. There were Browns, the Goldsteins, they were the Katz's. There were about 5 different Jewish kosher markets on Dwight Street, which was originally North Street. Everything, the bakery was on North Street, on Dwight Street. And everybody gathered there. And when you want to go shopping, like for Shabbos and Saturday, you'd go down to Dwight Street and go to Barney Burstein's. And go to Barney's, or now you go to Klibanov's market for fish. He had the fish market. And Chernick's had the chickens. And that's the way we shopped. And that's the shopping there. And then there was a clothing store, a Herman's. They had a clothing store. In fact, one of the Hermans belongs here too. She's one of the members here. They had a dry goods store. And the dry goods store, I remember my mother used to take us down there to buy us our socks, our underwear, pajamas, and things like that. That's what we did our shopping. And for Yontif, we'd go to the bakery on Dwight Street. And everything was on Dwight Street, on North Street, or Dwight or North, whichever one you want to call it.
What about Ferry Street?
Ferry Street was getting passé already. The only thing that
What
really
year?
had on Ferry Street left was Goss's Delicatessen at a Jewish ferry market, kosher market.
What year?
was all.
What year are we talking about that it was getting passé?
We're talking about in 1930.
Already then,
Yeah.
Ferry Street was going down, and Dwight or North Street was becoming the place to shop.
That's right.
How far
Dwight
apart
Street.
were they? How many minutes apart were they? These two streets, were they next to each other?
Well, Ferry Street was off Dwight.
So it was close by.
Well, you had
Less
to walk
than
a
a mile.
distance. It wasn't close by, you had to walk a distance. I would say it was a half a mile.
And when you went shopping, was it basically on Friday for Shabbos, or did people go during the week, or was Friday, it was very busy and crowded?
Thursdays.
Thursday?
Thursday was the busy day.
And
Thursday, they'd go for chicken, and they'd come to slaughter the chickens on Thursday night to have the chickens for Friday, ready to have. To have it kosher. I used to watch them slaughter the chickens in the meat market.
you would go in the
That's
back? You go in the back?
Go in the back.
You watched it.
You actually watched it?
I watched them. Oh, yes. And on Thursdays, you couldn't get into a butcher market. You could stand in line to get for Shabbos.
On Thursday, it was so busy. Can you recall the names of some of your friends from your childhood, some of the families?
Sure.
Please.
Browns, Chernocks, the Kaplans. Let's see, the Petlocks. I knew quite a few of them.
And they all lived near you.
Babetsky. Yep.
And where did you go to school?
I went to Chestnut. I went to Lincoln. I went to Classical High.
Okay. Mickey, do you want to contribute something to about your memories of the North End and shopping, or?
Yeah, well, my mother was born on Ferry Street. She was born on that street, 1891. And in the 1890s, Ferry Street was the street where all the stores were located. And it lasted, I would say, till almost 1940 or 1945. And then it started moving further up on Dwight Street and towards with the real North End. And that's where the 2 or 3 Jewish supermarkets were located there.
What were the supermarkets called?
Burstein's Market. Burstein is one of them.
Burstein.
Zanden was another one. George
Zanden.
Zanden. And
Yeah,
Weiner
Zanden.
Company.
Nadler's.
Who?
Nadler.
Nadler.
The Connor 10th and after White.
Yeah, and Weiner. He was from Boston. He was quite a nice store there.
That was modern.
That was a very modern store.
Modern store, Winers.
It's very clean.
Did these stores include where you could buy meat there and vegetables? The
Vegetables,
supermarkets?
not kosher meat.
Not
No, the
kosher
butcher
meat.
shops still remained in business.
That's
They
right.
did at that time, yeah. But all kinds of vegetables, canned products, and dairy products, It's an all-around general store in the food department.
Why do you think it moved from Ferry Street over to this area? And did the Jewish population move along with it?
Yes.
Yes,
They,
they did.
why was it
Yeah.
moving up in a way to
Moving
better
up.
housing,
They
better
started to
neighborhoods?
move up.
Exactly.
They started to move up from Ferry Street to George Street, then up to Dwight, and then up to Dorchester Street,
Cruz Street. They went
Crew
up to
Street, Prospect Street,
Better neighborhood. It
Carew
was a
Street.
Better neighborhood, better
Massasoit
better
Street.
housing there, better housing, and cleaner too. The area was cleaner.
And who moved into the houses that these people left? Were these other Jewish families moving in or other immigrant groups?
Some were.
But a lot of them were non-Jewish
Yeah,
that moved in there
that's
too.
right.
Can you remember some of them? Are we talking about Italian people, Irish people?
Irish.
Irish.
There's a lot of Irish moved in there. They came after the Jewish people moved out. They moved
The Irish would follow.
the Irish.
Are we talking 1920s? What period are we talking?
Between the 20s and the
Well,
30s.
closer to the 30s, yeah, 30s.
Can you recall having any Irish or Italian or friends who weren't Jewish?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you tell us some things about your friends?
Yes, we had neighbors Maloney's. They had a daughter that was a nurse at the Mercy Hospital. And Mrs. Maloney always came in to see my mother and always brought something in for her. She baked, she'd bring something in. My mother would bake and she'd bring something, Miss Maloney. They were the nicest people. And then they had a son, Harold, who was a policeman. And we had them as neighbors. They were wonderful. I remember them. Then we had another family across the street. And he used to deliver oil.
Murphy, his name was.
What?
Murphy, his name was, right?
What was his name?
Murphy.
Murphy.
Murphy,
Yeah.
So you know each other from childhood?
yeah. From Massasoit Street.
We
yeah.
lived on the same street.
A few houses apart.
Were you about the same age?
Just about.
Just about, yeah.
So you remember each other as children?
That's right.
And Eileen too.
Eileen too. I remember my mother used to wheel.
I'm a little
Her mother used to
younger
wheel
than
her
these
in the
two.
baby
But
carriage
she's a little
around
bit
the
younger.
neighborhood.
She's younger, yeah. She's a little bit younger, yeah.
So
I had
what schools did you all go to?
Chestnut Street School, that was a junior high
Chestnut
school.
Street Junior High School.
went
Classical
there.
High School.
Classical.
Then we went to
AIC.
Lincoln.
Yeah, I see.
Springfield College.
And then
Every
from Lincoln
darn
we
school
went to
available.
Chester.
Right.
And then to high school.
How aware were you all in Springfield in particular of being Jewish? I mean,
We didn't know the difference.
you weren't conscious
Didn't
like,
have that much
No,
difference.
no, except we used to stay out for
For
the Jewish holidays in
holidays.
school. We'd always never go to school on all the Jewish holidays. And
Were your families observant?
yeah, my mother and father were very observant. Yeah, so we never went to. And we were so observant that when Passover came, we took our own food to school.
Oh,
We
definitely.
couldn't eat the lunches there because of the 8 days of Passover.
You remember that too, Eileen?
A little bit of that, not a whole lot of it.
How about you, Stanley?
What's that? What was the question?
about your parents being observant, what it was like being Jewish in Springfield. Did you feel very different or special or
No,
unique?
because we were in the area where all the other people were Jewish.
Especially on his
Oh.
street. Yeah.
Yes, we were observant. I went to the synagogue, that's where I met Mickey.
Yeah. Chestnut Street.
Chestnut
Synagogue.
Street Shul.
Yes, Beth Israel.
Yeah, that's real. So
That-
you were in different
like,
neighborhoods, but you went to the same shul.
Yeah, not too far away. We might be
We're all in the same
5
neighborhood.
minutes away.
Just a couple streets away.
5 minutes away. That's right.
Stanley, can you add some things to your recollections of the North End and Dwight Street and Ferry Street? Can you remember?
Well, I remember Dwight Street, not so much Ferry Street. Dwight Street, Barney's Market, those stores that you mentioned, that was all part of the North End Jewish section. And most of the people who lived there were Jewish families. But
What year are we talking about?
immediately next to the several streets that were Jewish, there were other families who were not Jewish. And they weren't that far apart, but they seemed to settle in different areas and take, take over the streets. Because on Allendale Street, there you could name on the fingers of one hand those who were not Jewish.
Did people shop at each other's stores? Did non-Jews go to the kosher markets?
Oh, yes.
Some of them did.
Oh,
Some
yes.
did, yeah.
Many non-Jews used to buy kosher meat.
There was one on Allendale Street. Her name was O'Connor. She always stopped at Barney Burstein's. Remember? She told me.
Where did she live?
Huh? O'Connor. Do you remember that family? On Allendale.
No, I don't.
Because I sold to her when I was in 16 Acres. She says, I used to live on Allendale Street. I'd always go shopping in Barney's Market.
My brother
yeah.
had a drugstore on Dwight Street, on North Street. And he bought it from this man that bought the store originally. This Mr. Shackman had the store originally. A drugstore. It was a Jewish neighborhood. Mostly all Jewish folks came into the drugstore there, and non-Jews as well. And after that, after when Mr. Shackman passed on, my brother bought the store from him. And we kept getting all these different people coming in from the store. There were many non-Jews that came in from the neighborhood, lived on Allendale, Brookline Avenue, Jefferson Avenue,
Hebron.
all the Hebron Street, Ringgold Street, all these, Grosvenor Street.
Grosvenor Street, right.
A lot of Jewish people lived on Grosvenor Street. Brown's Market. Brown's used to have the kosher market on Dwight
It's
Street.
White Street, yeah.
Remember that?
Sure.
Yeah. They used to live on Grosvenor Street too.
I would like to ask, Eva, do you
Well, I
remember?
can tell you only about the past 50 years, the mass difference that I find it.
Where in 50 years ago when you came here?
Where did you shop?
Where did you shop?
Oh, on Dickinson Street, there was a fish store and a kosher butcher, and there was Magazines Bakery and Gus and Paul,
And what else?
and those were the Jewish places that I shopped. And there was a couple of the Growers Outlet
Supermarkets.
supermarket at that time.
Growers Outlet.
This is 15 years ago.
50.
50.
50 years.
50,
50?
yeah.
50 years.
Yeah.
And then there was a grinder stop that was open all night. That
Grinder?
fascinated me. Because in the middle of the night I would say, Murray, there must be a store open in Springfield. So my cousin Marshall that lived here all his life said there's one on
Island Pond Road.
on somewhere in the North End. There was an Italian grinder store. So at 1 o'clock, well, to me 1 o'clock was like 10.
You know that store you're talking about? It's downtown Springfield, and it's still there.
Yes, it's still there. I know.
What's it called?
That's not Antonio.
It's got an
Yeah,
Italian
Antonio.
name.
Antonio's.
Yes.
Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
We pass it
We
coming
pass
in.
it.
Yes.
Antonio's. Been there.
Antonio's. Thank God for the Antonio's. I said, it was the only store opened.
Yeah, he was open all night, practically.
Yeah. The only thing that kept me happy in Springfield was Antonio's. Because when I looked out the window, everything was dark, like everyone was fast asleep. And
What-
the people were so different to me.
Different from Hartford?
From,
New York City.
from New York.
From New York?
Yeah.
Well, it's a sleepy town.
Yeah, I mean, they were with the house dresses and the ankle socks and the loafer shoes.
And the house dresses.
And the house dresses. And I worked in Zayas. They all came to see my horns. You're Jewish? I says, yeah. Where's your horns?
People actually asked you
They were
this?
the straw hats and went to church on Sunday. You know, I never saw a Jew. Do you get buried standing up?
You get buried standing up?
But how come you experienced this and the rest of you didn't?
Well, she came
They
late.
lived here.
We lived
We
here.
were born here. We were born
We
here.
Well,
grew
but
up
she
with
said these
them.
people had never seen a Jew. How about all of you?
And, I mean, in Agawam. I worked in Zayas in
Oh, in
Agawam.
Agawam.
Oh, an Agawam.
I swear.
Theirs is a store.
Yeah.
Departments.
And even here, I found them, they were very clammy, God forbid, you come from New York, like I was different.
That's okay. I live in South Deerfield, and I'm from Manhattan. I'm very different.
Yeah, I could just,
I guess,
Well, even the Bronx and the Brooklyn, they're different too.
well, when I came here, there was one particular person that everyone thinks he's the greatest person, and I don't like New Yorkers. I said, I didn't even open my mouth to say a word. He said that right away, said to me, because he couldn't conceal it.
came right
He
out.
let it out.
I guess
But
what,
when I came here, I worked in Zayas, and I nobody was buying it. I'm buying this for my maids. The dollar blouses, you know, that they wore. I mean, I found them extremely different, but see, but I got by because I came with kids. See, so my kids became friends with the other kids, and so it was all right. That one woman said to my son, "Did you escape because you did something wrong in New York?" I said to Martin, he says to me, why did we come here? I said, because it was easier for Daddy to live here. He had a heart attack when he was 36 years old. So living in Springfield was a much quieter life. My cousin Marshall, that was born here later, the Pullman family, that's what brought me to Springfield.
Came from family.
I guess what we were asking also, before the war, the Second War, even earlier, did you experience any anti-Semitism? Can you recall any incidents in school,
Yes.
in your life?
Chestnut Street Junior High School was the bane of my existence. The kids there who were not Jewish would come right after us the minute school was let out, and my house was very close to the school. They would chase us, actually chase us, over those bad roads and things like that. It was terrible.
They weren't educated in
No, it was
how to
just
live
shocking.
with Jews.
And you knew they were chasing you because you were Jewish.
That's right.
You knew it.
How did you know that?
Oh, you can tell. You can tell.
But they
Well,
didn't,
they were nasty.
did they call you names too?
Yeah, they were nasty.
They called you
They
names.
called you names.
I don't recall exactly what some of the names were, but they did call us names.
Do you remember this too?
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Can you talk about some of your memories of this?
Well, there was, we had anti-Semites, and we had to just cope with it. They used to threaten us if we didn't give them 5 cents or 10 cents, bring it to school the next day. And I imagine that, and they said they were going to beat me up. So I used to give them a dime once in a while, but and I reported it as the principal, and after that they must have had a talk with them because they stopped doing that. But they threatened me if I didn't give them money. He thought all the Jews had money, and that's it. Yeah. But on the whole, though, I didn't have too much problem with anti-Semitism.
I didn't have a problem at all.
And some of my friends were non-Jewish too. I had one friend that lived next door. His name was Vincent Healy, and we were very good friends. And he wasn't Jewish. And
Where's Vincent now?
he died. He died. Yeah.
But what was your experience of Christianity? In other words, you may have had friends.
Yeah.
Did they ever invite you to go look at their church? Did you ever go into any events that were Christian? Anything that you could relate to that was
Well,
different
my-
from being Jewish? Let's go to Eileen 1 second.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, one year, it was Christmas
Okay.
Eve,
Wait,
and I worked with an Italian girl.
It's okay.
wait a second.
She,
Let her go, yeah.
she asked me, she said she wanted to go to church. She said, would I go to church with her? I said, I've never been to church. I said, but I'll go with you. And I did. I went to church with her. And I just sat there, just watched to see what was going on. And that was it. I didn't see anything wrong. And they bowed, they prayed, and it was their privilege to do whatever they wanted to do. But there was no harm there.
Right, so she was a good friend of yours, and she wanted to show
That's
you what
right.
she did, her faith.
That's right.
Did you invite her back to your shul?
I did.
And
As a matter of fact, she went with a Jewish fellow for a long time. She almost married him.
let me ask you about the war years. Do you have any particular memories growing up in Springfield during the war? Were your parents?
We weren't home, we were in the war.
Where were you, Stanley? Where were you stationed?
Oh, I was, first I went up to the Arctic up in northern
Somebody wants
Canada.
So you were drafted and you were in the Arctic.
How did you got a letter?
I became part of what they called Army Airways Communication System. And we were still part of the Air Force, but we serviced the planes coming in, that is, information-wise. We were at a base up in northern Canada with the weather people who were in the same organization. And we gave the information, and we had messages back and forth involving the planes that were coming from this country over to England. They went over the Canadian route. And that's where several of these stations were posted. So I was there for a year, and then came back to Westover for a month or two before I was assigned to another section of the same organization, AACS, Army Airways Communication System. And I stayed at Westover Air Force for a couple of months while I was living at home. But then we went over to California, and from there I went into the Central Pacific area, Kwajalein and Awetuck area, and spent the rest of the war out in the Middle Pacific, doing the same type of work, working with the airplanes that were going back and forth.
How many years altogether?
What?
How many years altogether?
4 years.
Let's move on to Mickey and find out what he did. Were you
Okay.
drafted also?
I was also drafted, yeah, and I was stationed in Camp Lee, Virginia, in the Quartermaster Corps for 2.5 years, and then afterwards I shipped out, and I was on the boat at Norfolk, Virginia, and we went up to the Rock of Gibraltar and Alexandria, Egypt, and India, and then we finally landed in the southern part of Iran. And it was called the Persian Gulf Command. And there were 30,000 soldiers there. And the reason they had soldiers there was because German planes couldn't reach that far at that time. That was quite a ways from Germany. So that was a safe place to land the ship, to have Lend-Lease. That's what we had, Lend-Lease. And we shipped up all the materials to the Russians through the Iranian border. Because Russia and Iran are right next to each other. And with that operation, they were able to drive the Germans back. They were fighting. They were brave soldiers, the Russians, but they didn't have enough equipment. So America supplied them with all the tanks and armament that they needed. So it was a vital area for the Russians because they got all the arms they needed to drive the German army back.
How long were you there?
I was there for two years. 2 years there. I was also in Iraq, Basra. That was a southern part of a big port there too. So I was in both places, Iraq and Iran. But it was a very interesting journey here because the temperatures were awful hot. It was 110 degrees at one time for 3 or 4 months at a time. But it was a dry heat, so I didn't mind it. But we also had some terrible sandstorms there, and you had to go inside to hide from the sand. You couldn't do anything. But every day at 2 o'clock, we had siesta from 2 to 4. It was so hot. And we worked with a bunch of British soldiers, and we were right in the field with them, and all of a sudden, everything stopped. Why? Because the British soldiers had to have their crumpets and tea. No matter how busy they are, they had to be served crumpets and tea. But it was a good experience for me. I was in Tehran, too, the main city of Iran, too.
When you came back, what differences did you see in your hometown?
Well, of course, things that were different because during the four years I was out in the service, there was prosperity. People were working. There was no recession, and there was a lot of new building going on. And right after, a few years later, we had urban renewal in Springfield. And the Ferry Street was eliminated. All those streets in the north end, because there was a highway coming through, and they eliminated about 10 streets there because it was a super highway. But it was a pretty prosperous city. Springfield was doing very well after the war.
Let's hear Stanley's. When you came back, what did you see?
What did I?
When you came back from the war, what was Springfield like? Was it very different?
Not to me. It seemed to be the same city. Same type of people. It's as though I hadn't left, as far as I was concerned.
Hmm.
And go ahead.
Well, the only thing is that the end around Ferry Street, all those stores were gone. There was nothing left on Ferry Street and Congress Street.
Wasn't that in the 60s, though?
Well, it came a little. Yeah, it came close to the end of 1950s when they started building these roads.
But you mean the shops were gone already? Are you saying the Jewish merchants had already left? They were closed?
No, they were moving towards the better sections of Springfield.
Where were they moving to?
Well, moving onto White Street, further up, where there were better housing there. The neighborhood was much better, because it was a rough, poor neighborhood, Ferry Street and Congress Street. It was.
When you say rough, what do you mean?
Well, I mean it was. It wasn't the best housing there. It was sort of dilapidated housing there, and I think there was a little bit of crime there too already. So they decided to move out of that area and better themselves, and that's what they did. They moved out, and they moved into a north end of Springfield, a certain part which was very nice. But they still had a few stores left there. They still had some stores left there. But the only stores that were left were two delicatessens on Ferry Street that survived until even 1970s. They survived.
What were the names?
What were they?
Benny's Delicatessen and Gus and was it
Gus and Paul?
No, Gus and Paul's Bakery was there.
Yeah.
And there was one other delicatessen on the corner of Main and Ferry Street. What was the name of that?
Benny's?
Goss's. The
Goss's.
Oh, she
Goss's.
mentioned that earlier.
Goss's
Right.
Delicatessen.
So let's go to the women. Eileen, do you remember the war years?
Well, I remember that it was very difficult for my father to get into the world and make a good living. He had children and so forth.
He
He
during
couldn't get supplies, maybe, huh? He couldn't.
Fruit and vegetables were the thing that he was most involved with, that the people wanted. They all loved him, so he kept getting people.
Did you have brothers in the war?
My brother Sam, yes.
He was I think he was in the South Pacific.
Yeah, he was.
He was in the South Pacific area. They lived right across the street from me in the North End. So I knew them pretty well.
I never knew that.
But you were pretty small.
So you wanted to tell us, why don't you tell us about the war years wherever you were living, New York probably?
Oh, in New York, we were very patriotic. I mean, we had no meat on Tuesday. We used the coupons. We were really war conscious. The lights went out every couple of days. They had rehearsals. It was. I lived on the 6th floor in New York with a little baby. I used to throw him in the crib and put everything dark, and I didn't even know where he was. I couldn't go find him. I say, cry so I can go find him. It was terrible. We collected cans. I went to all the factories and collected their samples to send. My husband gave blood. We did a lot. And then we had a block party that was really New York style.
Your husband was not in the war.
No, my husband worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard for the war. He repaired the Missouri.
Oh.
He met the Sullivan's mother. She came when the boat was repaired.
I'd like to skip a little bit now and ask you if any of you have children. We're curious when we interview people, the level of Jewish observance of your children, and if you have grandchildren, their level of observance. We're interested in one generation to the next. Have they been able to maintain and keep within the faith, or have they moved out? This is not a judgment, it's just a question to know what happened. Where are we with the next generations? Can we go around?
Well, then I feel very guilty. I didn't bring up my kids like my mother brought us up. I was going to be like more of a little rebellions. I mean, my kids observed the holidays. My grandson Mark was bar mitzvahed by Rabbi Edelman and never went out with a Jewish girl. Mark would graduate at Springfield College, and he never went out with a Jewish girl. They're just not interested in Jewish girls. I don't say a thing. To me, everything they do is okay. But they maintain the Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. They observe it. We eat together as a family. But I didn't do what my mother did. I feel guilty. I wish I did.
Do you have children or grandchildren?
I have 2 sons.
Did they get married?
They're married, and each one has 2 sons.
Did they marry Jewish girls? Did they maintain?
One did, one didn't.
And can you tell us the one who did? Let's start with the one who
The
did.
one who did,
What's his name?
he doesn't keep a kosher house. but he himself is probably a little more observant than his wife. And he's involved in his, well, it's a conservative show. And he's fairly active in that. And the other one has, well, he married a Catholic girl, and neither one of them is that religious. And
How are they raising their children?
whatever, well, the kids have friends who are Jewish, and they know that they are half Jewish. And other than that, they don't know very much about the Jewish religion or the Catholic religion.
Okay.
Eileen, do you
Sorry.
have children or grandchildren?
Well,
Can you tell us about them in terms of their observance
the
or?
brightest bunch of kids you ever met in your whole life.
Yeah.
And did they marry Jewish people?
Yes.
Are they raising their kids Jewish? Do you know?
Yes.
Yeah. What level of Jewish observance are the grandchildren at?
Well, I think that they are very much into the family life, and they don't want to, get out of it. So they're all pretty much the same. They all go to the same temples. They all have friends who are,
You're in
Jewish.
conservative
Yeah.
synagogue.
Where do they go to synagogue?
They may not
well,
be
they
here.
live
I know.
in Boston,
Uh-huh.
but they do go to synagogues
In
in
Boston.
Boston. Yeah.
Okay, well, I was brought up very religious, very observant, but when I got in the Army, I changed. I'm not, I'm still religious to a certain extent, but my children and grandchildren are not. One of my grandsons married a Protestant girl, and they're not. But they're not being brought up religious at all. And the other one belongs to a conservative synagogue, and he knows his Hebrew. He knows his Hebrew good. My son-in-law does, and my daughter knows Hebrew. In fact, I taught all my grandchildren their bar mitzvah. And at that time, I taught a lot of pupils bar mitzvahs, but they just right now they're not very observant. None of them are very observant.
Mhm.
But it just has something to do with the fact that where they live there aren't too many Jewish people, and they just don't bother with it anymore. So I'm a little disappointed that way, but I still love them, and I'm still very friendly with everybody. Whether Jewish or not, it doesn't really make any difference to me now. If my mother was living, she'd turn over, and she wouldn't enjoy that attitude at all. But I go along with the flow of things, and that's all I can say. But they both had nice bar mitzvahs, but they didn't continue.